You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another episode of Red-Eye Responds. That's right, I'm doing another response video, and this time it is again South Park related. Today I'm doing a response to a Phantom Strider video, someone who I have kind of a love-hate for, because, don't get me wrong, he drives me nuts, but he actually seems like a pretty cool guy. What I mean by that is Phantom Strider makes a lot of points I completely and totally disagree with in his videos, and he does kind of top 5, top 10 videos, and that's like all he does. But whenever he's criticized, he's always a very good sport about it and is super chill about it, and he's always very clear when he makes his videos that they are only his opinion and they are not objective in any way, shape, or form. That said, he does have a lot of things I disagree with, so that's why today we're doing another response video, and we're doing one to him. I actually have another response video planned to him later in the week as well. But as always with these responses, I do not want any harassment directed towards Phantom Strider. Like I said, he's a cool guy, and I think he's a very good sport about stuff like this. I'll also admit that I'm going to probably be making a lot of the same points multiple times in this video, because a lot of my issues with Phantom Strider are typically the same problem. And that problem being, I think he's a little bit too sensitive when it comes to certain things. Meaning he doesn't like mean-spirited comedy, he doesn't like things that are too dark or too graphic, and while I don't agree with that, and while sometimes I've, jokingly called him a pussy, I think that's fine if that's not to his taste. So, if I do call him a pussy or anything like that this video, just know that I don't mean anything by it. And if by the off chance he sees this, I don't want him to think I think ill of him, because I do actually enjoy some of his videos. That said, it's also worth noting that this particular video, Top 10 Worst South Park Episodes of All Time, is actually one he's unlisted, so I don't know if he even stands by these points anymore. Either way, I thought it was worth responding to, since it was one of his first videos I saw. And then the other one that I'm going to respond to later on this week, hint, it's anime-related, was actually the first one I saw of his. But that one I'll review later in the week, and again, that one is one that'll make me a little bit more angry than this one will. Because, believe it or not, I actually think he makes some really great points in this video, this South Park-related one. Anyway, let's hop into it.
It seems like the older South Park gets, the more I respect the series.
Same. I completely agree with you, man. This is one thing. Like I said, Phantom Strider seems like a cool guy, and he does make good points at times. I completely agree with him for that sentiment.
I actually thought this list would be easy, but unlike something like Family Guy, it's surprisingly hard to find an episode of South Park that just outright insults me.
Once again, excellent. I agree. We both enjoy South Park, and he has a South Park avatar on his channel, so I don't think this guy is someone who doesn't like the series. Phantom Strider is definitely a fan of the series, and I appreciate how hard it was for him to actually find 10 episodes he didn't like, so yeah, good on ya.
The trashy episodes that make this list tend to stand out as unbelievably gross, incredibly uncomfortable, or uncharacteristically mean-spirited.
No! See, there's that buzzword he likes a lot, mean-spirited. Like I said, I disagree with him on the whole concept of being mean-spirited, and while I do think mean-spirited stuff can be not as fun to watch at times, I do think it can be done well, and when it is done well, it can actually be very entertaining, so that's one thing we're going to agree on a lot in this video.
As always, if you like these episodes, good for you. It's just my personal opinion.
It's because he's always saying shit like that I think he's such a cool guy. Like I said, he's totally willing to accept that people do not agree with him, and I love that about him. That's one of his better characteristics. Again, I don't mean to just, go back and forth between negative and positive, but I just want to point out this is why I like Phantom Strider. This is the part of him that I do like.
I have this issue when South Park points the finger at everyone and says, "You're all to blame," and doesn't really give a reason behind it. What exactly have we done wrong?
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that one. I actually like that they do that. They point out that everyone is flawed and that nothing is one-sided. And while I do get where you're coming from because you think this episode just blames everyone for everything, I think that that's something that I really like about South Park, is they try not to pick sides and they poke fun at everyone equally.
Since when do Americans, Australians, or any Western country for that matter care too much about politics?
I'd argue that people actually do care too much about politics now. Like, maybe it wasn't as much back when this was uploaded a couple years ago, but in recent years, politics is all I ever fucking hear about anymore, so I think that that's more relevant than ever now.
It's hard enough to get a lot of people in the US to actually care enough to vote. Now we're going to make fun of the small portion that actually cared about politics?
I don't think that's what it was doing. I think that was just, people getting way too hyped up about it. I don't think they were saying, hey, don't vote. I think they were just saying, don't get too fucking hyped up about it. It's the joke that people treat it like a sports game. They get so hyped up for their team.
Eat, pray, queef. I guess this episode got me thinking.
I never thought of this episode as one trying to make you think. Like, maybe it is trying to make you think, not have to have double standards about stuff, but I think it was just mainly to be gross and tell fart jokes. I really think that's the whole point of this episode. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think it was doing. I think the whole feminism thing of it was just, like, a joke in and of itself. I don't think it was trying to be too deep. I mean, sure, I'm sure it was trying to have a commentary, because it is South Park, but I think you're reading too much into that.
But jeebus, this episode is so painfully preachy.
Again, I never thought Eat, Pray, Queef even really had a message behind it, so I don't even think it's being preachy. I think you're just reading too much into it. Again, I mean, I guess kind of, but I thought it was all just kind of a joke at how little of an issue this is, because this isn't even a real problem that people deal with. Queefing is not something that I think is something women think about on a regular basis, and I don't think women are, like, upset that men tell fart jokes and not queef jokes, but hey, maybe they are upset about that. Who the hell knows?
This episode just paints all guys as alpha male douches with no self-awareness whatsoever.
If I thought that's what it was doing, I'd agree with you wholeheartedly, because I think that that's a message that I would not get behind, is, saying all guys are douches. I hate it when people say shit like that. Like, I don't put my own politics into my videos, but again, I think that people take things too far when they say shit like that. So if they were saying that, I'd agree with you completely, but I didn't get that vibe watching the episode.
A Million Little Fibers. Wait. An episode which absolutely none of the main characters are in.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I like when the show goes in new directions and tries to show other parts of the town.
Oprah's lower region pulling out a gun is kinda cute.
I'd say it's funny, but cute is not the word I'd use for it.
I suspect Matt and Trey actually knew that Tally annoyed fans.
As far as I know, everybody likes Tally. I like Tally. Most of my friends like Tally. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just me and my friends. We like Tally. I mean, yeah, he's kind of a joke character that's, he's the most pointless character there is, but I love Tally.
I could never understand the purpose of this episode.
I'll tell you right now, the purpose of it is people who are anti-smoking can be really preachy and be assholes to people who smoke. Yes, smoking is bad for you. People fucking get that. But the fact is, people get really uppity about it and get really judgmental. And they can be really preachy and be total assholes about it. That's the whole message behind this episode.
This episode just seemed kind of lazy and mean-spirited.
Good old mean-spirited again.
I was really curious what beef Matt and Trey had against Bob Reiner.
It was because Rob Reiner was going on this whole big spiel about anti-smoking at the time, and he was being a total dick to everyone there. And the thing is that they were pointing out is it's hypocritical that he makes fun of that he goes after all these people who are doing something detrimental to their own health. He himself eats like crazy and gains a ton of weight. The joke is that people don't care if you overeat and are unhealthy in that way, but for some reason they care if you smoke and pollute your lungs that way. So they're trying to point out the double standard there. That's the whole point with the whole Rob Reiner shtick.
It has another of those weird underdog stories. This time, apparently, if you're drugged up, you're enlightened. And the people who try to get you off drugs are just stuffed shirts trying to ruin your fun.
Again, I don't think they were trying to glorify drugs with this episode. I think that the joke was that, people take this shit way too seriously, and they get really uppity, and they go after you for doing something that ultimately primarily affects yourself. Granted, I'm not going to say drugs can only affect the person doing them. It depends on the context. Like, you're doing like heroin or something like that, and then you're stealing stuff from your family. That's not good. Or if you're like smoking weed and there's people who are inhaling that weed around you, that's not nice either. So, I mean, obviously there's different elements and different angles to take at it, but what they're getting at here with the Mr. Mackey subplot is people take that shit way too far.
Scott Tenorman Must Die. An absolute fan favorite. It makes itself into a lot of top 10 lists, and to be honest, I've never understood why.
Because it's good, because it's funny, because it's an interesting revenge story. Many reasons.
To summarize, the whole episode's about Eric trying to get back at a local teenager for selling him pubic hair.
I mean, does that absurd premise itself not make you laugh? I mean, think about it. I mean, yeah, it's subjective, but come on.
I dislike both Eric and Scott.
Eric's the best character of the show, man. I know you're not a fan of mean-spiritedness, so I kind of figured you wouldn't like Cartman to begin with, but I love Cartman. He's the best part of the show. And, I know there's going to be some people that disagree, but I'd say overwhelmingly the fan base agrees. Again, that's just speaking from people I know. But no, I think that they're both... I think that Eric's a great character, and I think that his whole rivalry with Scott was very entertaining.
I know I use this term a lot, but there's this really nasty spirit behind this episode that just makes me feel uncomfortable watching it.
Well, at least you acknowledge that you talk about mean-spiritedness a lot. And I do get that that's a big thing that you don't like, and I can see why, but I think when done right, as in this episode, I think it's really well done.
It's filled with mostly very black humor, so black that I just couldn't laugh at it.
I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of dark humor, so that's why I don't mind it. Well,
I kind of chuckled at the extreme end.
Something's really rockin' on planet number 3. Modern man's got prehistoric company.
Ending, but even that's a little too black humor. But that being said, it's a big fan favorite, so I'm probably just a little too butters for this episode.
well, that's a good way of putting it, I guess. Fair enough.
Terrence and Phillip, not without my anus. Even the title of the episode is trashy.
I mean, it's Terrence and Phillip. Would you expect it to have a high-class title?
An episode purposely made to be a big middle finger to fans on April Fool's Day.
The shocking truth about Cartman's lineage will not be seen tonight, so that we can bring you the following special presentation.
I mean, that's personally why I think it's a funny thing that they did. It's actually one of my favorites from Season 2, because of that. I mean, granted, it's no Chicken Lover, which is my all-time favorite of Season 2, but it's still a good one.
I just thought it was a really weak episode. Terrence and Phillip belong as just one 10-second fart skit that the boys see when watching TV.
I mean, I think that, yeah, Terrence and Phillip are definitely a one-trick pony, but that's kind of the joke. And I thought all of the stuff with Saddam Hussein made the episode worth watching, because it established Saddam more as a character. Granted, he was introduced before this, but I think that this was the time when he really came to shine. And his original appearance in the Mexican staring frog of southern Sri Lanka was only like a second. So it was nice to give Saddam a lot more screen time, because he's one of my favorite South Park characters.
Brittany's new look. Personally, I think Season 12 was the worst season of South Park ever made.
I could not disagree with you more. Season 12 is fucking phenomenal. It's amazing. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Personally thought pretty much every episode in Season 12 was golden. I mean, it had Pandemic, it had Major Boobage, it had Super Fun Time, which, side note, Super Fun Time, one of my all-time favorite episodes. It was actually one of the first episodes of the show I watched. I say one of for a reason, because I did watch it on TV a little bit before that, but I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up, so I had to sneak it when I could. And so Super Fun Time was one of the first ones I watched online, and again, it was after I had seen a few other episodes by sneaking them on TV when my parents weren't home as a kid. But Super Fun Time is one of my earliest South Park memories.
When I think of an episode of South Park that is just unpleasant, this tends to be the first one I think of. Something about it is just so dark and harsh.
I mean, it's supposed to be dark and harsh. The whole point of Brittany's new look is that the paparazzi are fucking vultures. They destroy people's lives, and we need to just let people have their fucking lives, even celebrities. The fact that we obsess over them too much is a big problem, and it causes people's mental health to deteriorate. I mean, why do you think child actors get destroyed so much? Because their lives are just filmed in front of a camera all the time, and it destroys them. Celebrities can't just go out and eat a meal with their family without getting swarmed by people. It's fucking ridiculous, and that's the point they were trying to make with this episode.
But it's another of those messages they could have just gotten across in one scene. Yes, I get it.
I mean, they drag it out because that's really how it happens, is this shit gets dragged out so much, it's ridiculous. People's lives get fucking, like, thrown under a microscope for so fucking long, and they just can't get a fucking moment's peace just because they're in the entertainment industry.
There's a small percentage of the population that has a low enough intelligence to read celebrity magazines and actually pay to see Adam Sandler films. But it's a smaller percentage than you'd think.
I mean, I'd say I probably agree with you, but the fact that shitty tabloid magazines sell would tell me no, that's not the case. I think people care about celebrity drama. I think it's something that the masses do care about, and while I personally don't, and I do think it is a smaller number than you'd think, I do still think it's a very high number.
I feel dirty and very uncomfortable watching this episode.
As you should, that's what they were going for.
This episode was so revolting that I removed it from my library so long ago that I couldn't actually figure out where I'd put it.
I mean, yeah, again, that's the point. That's the joke. It's supposed to be really disgusting.
This isn't just the worst South Park I've ever seen. It's one of the most gruesome pieces of animation I've ever watched. And I watched Violence Jack.
Now, I'll agree Violence Jack is gruesome, but the implication you're giving there makes me a little pissed. But we'll get to that next time, because, hint, hint, he talks about Violence Jack in the next video of his I'm going to respond to.
Did I mention they show actual live footage of a sex change operation while Mr. Garrison is under the knife?
Yeah, not gonna lie, I agree with him on this one, at least with that part of it. I don't think this is the worst episode, nor would I put it in my top 10, But it is pretty fucking disgusting, and they do show the actual footage, which I typically close my eyes when it's on screen, so I'm with them on this one.
They're making fun of transgenders, who frankly are already at a 47% suicide rate, and
I'm not going down that rabbit hole with you.
while I'm certainly not pro-transgender,
Not gonna play that game.
I have to point out that this is one of the toughest top 10 lists I've done. A lot of the episodes here could still be interpreted as meaningful, and I could just be personally biased towards them. More than the majority of the shows I've watched, South Park is open to interpretation, and an episode I hate, other people may really enjoy.
And I couldn't agree with you more, dude. Again, Phantom Strider can be really cool and really self-aware, and I appreciate that with him. That's all I've got for you guys today. Have a good one.